I came to understand that photography had a broader vocabulary than the one that everyone was using. The fact that it involved a removal from the fetishistic, consumerist aspect of photography was also appealing. I see the lens and the modern camera as if all painters were using 3 colors. So as a young person launching out with an aspiration to make art, not so much to be a photographer, but to make art or to have my images have breath, I felt that I needed to use some visual vocabulary that wasn't the same vocabulary that I'd seen trillions of times in images. In my work, I've really tried to keep myself out of my work. The marks behind you are not made by my hand, so I'm not planting the shrubs, I'm not gardening. Yet the whole thing is set up by me. So there's this dance between revealing and not participating. My interest in the snake now, as an adult, is entirely metaphorical. And I think in a way the snake, like the mushroom, which is also something that children are warned against, sets it up to have a kind of psychological vibrancy. And snakes in all cultures have that vibrancy, and generally they represent the underworld. A creature that bridges the underworld and the waking world, the surface of the world. So the bird, in a way, is a symbol of a creature that bridges the world between the upper world and this world. It's the opposite of the snake. That's why the series, most of the works with the bird are in the series called In Between, because it's in between earth and heaven, between silver and gold. When you say Medusa to people, you focused on the part of the Medusa story, which is when her head is decapitated. So there's an image of Medusa's head. But the Medusa story is right around that. There's how Medusa became Medusa. And there's a story of her head after it's decapitated. The image of the snakes in the wedding dress came to me because I'd had this desire to understand Medusa, but the image came unconsciously. And after I'd made the image, I looked at it and thought, oh, wait a minute. This is part of the Medusa story, because there's a story of Medusa's body after her head is removed. Out of Medusa's neck, 2 drops of blood emerge, and when they hit the ground, 2 creatures are born. One is a golden shining man. Sounds pretty positive, right? And the other creature that is born is Pegasus. And for me, Pegasus is the most optimistic image in art. And so the Medusa story turns from being immensely toxic to immensely positive. Well, the beginning was around age 15 and going to show my photographs to an art teacher. And before opening my portfolio, I was apologizing for my work. I said, I'm sorry, my pictures are not very good. I don't have a good camera. And his response was, you don't need a good camera. You can make the best pictures in the world with a pinhole camera. And that one sentence I considered to be my entire education at that school. And years later, I thought, well, I'll try that. So I made a pinhole camera. And that led me eventually into the idea of using no camera. Photograms, I think, appeal to me because immediacy, freshness, unexpectedness, the scale relation of 1-to-1. I was able to take control of the image. I was able to make the image rather than take the image. the outside world was no longer of interest. I could generate a world of my own. These pictures are made with a single drop of water. If you imagine a drop of water falling into a body of water, it creates a circular wave. And theoretically, that wave is infinitely large. And so within that giant circular wave, all life is contained. The idea is that it's big enough to contain everything. So then it becomes the ark, the A-R-K, the boat. It's also an arc, A-R-C, and it kind of connects, it's an intellectual connector for me around why I've worked with water for 30 years. The idea of photograph and mirror seemed a perfect and also magical combination. Traditionally, people had made daguerreotypes of skulls, candles, books, hourglasses. But because as a modern practitioner of the daguerreotype, my desire is to make images that are, an unheard of 11 by 14 inches or 16 by 20 inches, there's the possibility to do things one-to-one. So the skull became one-to-one. But it has a very traditional, literal, I would say superficial image. Memento Mori as an object that would allow one a moment to ponder one's demise. A device more than a picture. The rabbit's, a traditional Easter symbol. It's fertility, it's sacrifice, it's the lamb. The lamb of Jesus is the lamb, the sacrifice, the murder of the innocent. These things are in us. We're not switched on to that channel where we really have access to that material. We're kind of switched on to cultural channel 2017 globalization. That's our channel. But the other channels are still playing, we're just not turning them on. So those images just popped out, of an interface between Adam and Adam's story and those other channels. Because I felt bereft, I realized that I had a position to appreciate the Taj that most academics didn't even consider. Without the bereavement having a role in your thinking, you couldn't possibly approach the problem of the Taj. The impetus of the Taj was this passion, need, like biological need for distraction, because death wasn't an option. In the few seconds when I was having my revelation around the Taj, I realized I needed to do the hardest thing that I could think of. And what jumped into my head was world's biggest daguerreotype, which was hard to do. I own this negative from 1874 of the Taj, photographed by John Murray. But I'd never really looked at it. And when I really looked at it, I realized that he'd sort of screwed it up. Because you think of the Taj as this perfect, symmetrical building. The way he'd photographed these 3 panels of the Taj, it wasn't possible to reassemble the building for it to look anything like a Taj. So using Photoshop, I was able to reassemble it. And in the end, I just sort of threw that away and made what I call Frankentage, which is I just made it my own building. The dome was bigger than it should be, towers were removed, But it was also the idea of finishing his print, because I thought, how nice, that he couldn't finish it properly, and 150 years later, I could work with his material. A lot of our experience of, we'll call it life, this experience, has the quality of a dream. I mean, we're going to be dead in a few minutes. And what's the difference between dying at 40 and dying at 80? Not really much. So what's real? If this isn't real, what's real? I think sometimes we get an intimation of what's real. And it's not the solid, tangible, material world. I think what's real is also constant and eternal. I think of my work and all of those pictures as signposts. And they're signposts to a destination that can't be named. And the signposts are more or less accurate. I feel some signposts are very good. They're pointing in the right direction and they're very readable. And others are just, small and like go that way maybe, but they're not the destination. Those pictures are not the destination. I can only point. That's my job, it seems, to point.